Right. People are perky and on time and ready to go, it seems. Hi, folks. People are rolling in 1 minute before. I guess I should invite Dr. James to each of these. Then people will be on time and they'll they'll stay the full. Thank you. It's great to see everybody. In case while we're waiting for people to roll in, I'll show you my sleepy puppy. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, that's one of them. For those who know me, we have 6 animals here. Not at MarketSmart. That's just my house. Actually, well, 2 of them are horses, so they're not in the house. But 2 cats, 2 dogs, and 2 horses. And we foster. Oh, because these aren't enough, so we foster. And we're the neighborhood like collector of all the animal stuff for the foster care place. Anyway, older animals we foster, by the way.
I look forward to your next book, I Bought a Zoo.
Yeah, it's probably the way to go. So yeah, I'm doing my chit chat banter here just to fill time while everybody rolls in. Maybe if anybody has good news, you want to post it into the chat. We like to start with good news. Like, did you close a big gift? Did you I don't know, did you raise money? Did you meet someone and have an amazing conversation, learn something new? Did you have a birthday? Did you go anywhere? What's the good news? Texas Tech University, let's see. Beat Texas. Oh, I should know that. Yeah, except for the University of Texas is a customer of ours. Texas Tech, for some reason, wouldn't buy. We tried. Texas, yeah. All right, go Elizabeth. Yeah. Someone just closed a second CGA. All right, Elizabeth. Thank you. Good. I mean, I don't know if we had any part in that. It's probably you, all you. All right, so people are still rolling in, but I am going to get the party started. Let's share my screen right here. I'm getting pretty comfortable with this these days. This is probably our 8th Mastermind Mixer. So, all right, yeah, welcome everybody. Today is a very special day. We have a very special guest joining us. It is the one, the only, Dr. Russell James, the person who created well, I guess he created all the content for the Donor Story Epic Fundraising e-course, and I am forever grateful for that. Let's see, we'll do some quick housekeeping. Is just remember that anyone involved in your cause can attend these mastermind events. These are for MarketSmart customers and e-course students. So you're going to be mixed if you're an e-course student or customer, I guess, but you're not a MarketSmart customer, that's okay. But all MarketSmart customers do get the chance to attend these. So also feel free to share your meeting link with other people on your staff, your leadership, your volunteers, even your board members can come to these events. So the more the merrier. I see that the number of people attending keeps growing. So either that means we're doing something right or we're just getting the word out. So, or both. Also, if you're not a MarketSmart customer, remember you can always go to our website and click Let's Talk, and that's what we'll do. It's not a high pressure sales event. We don't do that kind of stuff, but we will talk to you and see if you're qualified and if there's a fit and a reason for us to continue talking further, and then we'll set you up with somebody to talk to, and we'll continue collaborating. It's not a big sales job. It's determining whether it's a good fit. All right, so today we're going to talk about metrics that matter. This is something that I was just talking to Dr. James, I have been thinking about a lot. I think it's a problem in the sector, and I aim to try and fix it and turn it into the MarketSmart way that we recommend people do it. We're not quite there yet, but I'm going to give you a taste of it here. We're going to break into groups and talk, smaller groups, talk about what metrics related to your role do you currently measure. So I'm not looking for, in this breakout, we're not looking for like low dollar transactional metrics, or how many people ate the fish versus the steak at your events or galas. We're looking for what metrics in the major and planned gift realm are you measuring. Then I'm going to give you a quick presentation, a little bit of my understanding and where we're going here for the MarketSmart way about metrics. We'll break into groups again, and then I'll say not which metrics do you measure, but which ones do you think you should measure? So that's a little different question. We'll do that in small breakouts again. And then we'll come back together and have you rapid fire share your ideas. And I guess I'll try and type them out, and we'll collect them, or we'll put them in the chat. And then we'll have a wrap up and see if there's any other dialogue or questions. So I hope that works for everybody. Let's start off with breaking into the groups and talking about what metrics related to your role do you currently measure. All right, keep that in mind. Which metrics are you currently measuring? And with that, Trisha, my Wizard of Oz will do the disappearing act here. But that was an interesting few minutes, at least for me. All right. So yeah, it was fascinating. We started off slow, and then we picked up steam, started to get angry at the administration and board members and leadership and stuff, So yeah, looks like people are still Zoom. Apparently, when we have such a large group, it takes a couple minutes to get everybody back. All right, so as people are returning, I'll go back to our agenda. Maybe, did anybody take notes and want to just, if you did, just go ahead and throw the metrics that you heard into the chat tool. It's okay if there's duplicates. I'm just curious what we've seen, or what people were saying, and I know some of them were pretty simple. I'll put some in there. Legacy gifts, but then there's documented legacy gifts. Go ahead, if everybody contributes, we'll probably, meaningful contacts. I saw, we heard significant conversations was one. Again, don't worry if you duplicate. Yeah, face-to-face calls, tasks, stewardship contacts, promoter score. Interesting. If they're qualified, affluence, affinity. It's interesting how the different groups, what a variety we ended up. Thank you for everybody participating and throwing all this in there. Trisha, if you could download this or copy and paste it so that we get it all. But feel free to keep throwing those in there if you want. I'm gonna get into my presentation that I promised. It's fairly short, but I want to just invite you to take a look at what's going on in my brain. I've been thinking about this, reading about this, studying what the private sector measures, studying what the private sector versus the nonprofit sector measures. And it's interesting because it seems like we break down into two types of metrics. There's administrative or reasons for capturing metrics. There's the administrative reasons that the administrators like, or the board members, the leadership enjoys. It satisfies, as Dr. James taught us in the course, their hero story, to see that their staff are working and doing things. But then there's sort of donor-centered reasons that help the donor advance their own hero story. So if you even read like the first page of one of Dr. James's books, or you got into the first lesson of the course, you know that the one thing is to advance the donor's hero story. And if you haven't gotten that into the course, I recommend you do, especially even the fast track. Remember, the fast track only takes about 2.5 hours. The entire course is 20.5 hours approximately. And you can always do both or just parts and deep dive. But it's interesting to me because the donor-centered reasons are the ones where we're looking at the consideration continuum and we're trying to identify and address and remove points of constraint that are impeding the donor's progress or advancement of their hero story. If we only look at administrative reasons to satisfy the leadership and administrators, and their hero story, that's not good for the donor. And in the end, it's not good for the organization. So that's my first finding. The other thing is that, and this is very clear, and Dr. James talked about this in his research, is that there is a big difference between low dollar fundraising and major gift fundraising, and major gifts include legacy gifts. We're really talking about the difference between cash versus assets in general. And the way you go about raising each of these is very, very different. So fundraising leaders are running two very different operations. The one that's tactical versus the other is strategic. One that targets people, the other engages people. One that sort of aims to take or get money, and the other that it collaborates or advances the donor's hero story. One's that cry need, the other offers hope. The one that schmoozes, maybe, others that develops relationships. It's funny watching you smile as I read these off. I'm seeing everybody, one that's transactional, the other's relational, one's trivial, the other's consequential, one's impulse oriented and the other's deliberative. And then the last is really, it's about asking for money versus asking about asking. Asking about asking. Now, I didn't make up that term. I can't take credit for it. I love this book, in case anyone else has ever read it, from Ken Stroman. Ken wrote, and it's a very short book. It looks like it has a lot of pages, but his writing style is terrific, and so I recommend it. But I love this concept of asking about asking. Because if you continue using the Socratic method, as Dr. James pointed out in his research, and you ask about asking, you end up with bigger gifts. And you don't even have to ask for the gift in the end. The people come forward and just say, okay, I'm ready. So this is fascinating, is that, and it's hard. I have empathy for folks who are leading organizations. They have to run two different types of operations. And this leads to misuse of metrics because they tend to gravitate towards the more activity-oriented, or they misuse metrics entirely. Like someone, Cecilia was mentioning in our group, that leaders will often want to only count legacy gifts that are documented. So that drives you to ask for documentation over and over, and that upsets people, and then they may remove you from their estate plan. But, and I got this from Dr. James's content, is, I believe, is this misuse of metrics puts unrealistic expectations on fundraisers, which drives high turnover and high costs for hiring replacements. And that turns into lost institutional knowledge about each donor and the relationship you have with them. When you lose that knowledge, then the donor is like, okay, you're a new fundraiser. Well, now my trust is diminished. And all of this is burdensome on staff. And in fact, the one study found that, in fact, Dr. James, maybe I'll finally give you something to say, even though you just wanted to participate but that study that you found about the charities and the burdensome demands can you maybe elaborate on that real briefly?
Yeah, sure. So this was a study of several hundred fundraising organizations, and it was looking at, how did leadership approach or value these metrics? And, one of the realities was the places that used the most metrics, they were, most focused on the numbers and hit the numbers. It actually reflected a culture where there was basically a lack of trust in what the fundraisers were doing. And so when you have this lack of trust and you want to stick them in a tighter and tighter box and, to control it, down to the last minute, and it basically didn't work. Those were the organizations that were the poorest performers.
Yeah, it's like the harder they place their grip on the fundraisers and the donors and try and squeeze those metrics, the more the money just falls right out of their hands. It is true. So what I've found in studying this, looking at my own company, by the way, because we manage metrics, is that they're very much activity based, and that's where most people gravitate. And it's very hard, even for us at MarketSmart, and I'm sitting here writing about this stuff all the time, that we're focused on things like calls and visits and asks, solicitations. And there's this traditional way of looking at the fundraising process that I'm going to break apart in just a minute. But maybe you all recognize this as it begins with prospect identification. And then often the leadership will populate a caseload and hand it over. And that can range from 50 people to 150. And sometimes I've seen them at 500 people. It's nuts. And then you go about qualifying people. And then if they're qualified, you cultivate, solicit, negotiate, and finally go into stewardship. Sadly, and I know there's one person who's actually on this meeting, that staff are often asked to just go meet someone and just go set the meeting, go meet them and ask them for money. So skipping the process of qualification and cultivation you may get some go away gifts, but it's not really, you're not going to get the gifts of significance with that, but it does satisfy leadership. Now, this is, and you'll see it's not very different. I just added a little bit here to what I call preliminary qualification and automated cultivation. That's all I added to this. So, and of course, it's a little self-serving because MarketSmart does that. But I think that there's room for us to recognize that there's a zone of preliminary qualification where people have leaned in and engaged and filled out a survey, in our case, and I know not everybody's a MarketSmart customer, but many of you are, where people lean in and they're not ready to meet with you or talk to you. They need to be warmed up with cultivation. But the preliminary qualification gets them on your radar and them thinking about giving in a different way, because nobody's really ever asked them these kinds of questions, right? Now, here's where the rubber really starts to meet the road, is when we take this kind of path that I just described and elongated with MarketSmart's, and we juxtapose it with Dr. James's hero story. And again, I'm hoping that you've gotten that far in the training and in the e-course. If you haven't, I highly recommend you go learn about it, because this changed everything for me learning about this. It really was that significant, is that the beginning of the process where people are maybe at arm's length and they're preliminarily self-qualifying, and then they're engaging with automated email cultivation. This is where we together, and they included, are understanding their original identity. They're reflecting on why they care and how they identify with the cause and their people, their values, and how they align. And they're discovering their own motivations, as are you. And then over time, and it could be months or years, there's a gaining of alignment. And oftentimes it's really that the timing is not right. And we need to wait till that business gets sold, or that mom that they're taking care of gets out of the hospital and such. You know, you've all heard those stories. And then you go and you will completely qualify them and make sure that they're really worthy of your time. I mean, if they're talking about leaving a bequest of $50, I mean, no offense, but that's not something you can't afford to spend time on that. But then once you understand that these are people you want to really spend time with, then you meet with them and cultivate them. And then if they don't self-solicit, you will ask them with a proposal to accept your challenge and make the gift. As Dr. James taught us, this is the point where you want to help them go back to their original identity, visualize why they care and the hero they want to be in their own life story, and whom they will identify with. Who are their people? Who are the people they will be helping and such? Who are the beneficiaries? And then that provides social emotion, which is really what drives our entire civilization, is social emotion, meaning we want to help others. We just want to help others. And when they reflect on that, at that point, and if there's trust and the relationship is sound and it makes sense, then they will say yes. And then we can move into the victory mode, which is where they get to shine in the glow and feel how the value. What did they get in exchange for the gift? You know, it may just be notoriety. It may just be a internal sense of being becoming the person they always wanted to be. And then finally, there's the hero's return, where they get the enhanced identity. This is like in Star Wars when they finally got the medals put in. It was the very end, you know, and that's where stewardship comes in. You want to remind them of how great they are and express gratitude. So this to me was very powerful. I know it's a lot to take in all at once, but the alignment of Dr. James's finding about the donor's hero story with our actions, or what we do, is really, really important. It's important to understand where the donor resides in their consideration continuum, because the metrics we look at and develop should align with not only what your board and your leadership want, but what the donor needs, so you can help them advance their story. So this means that we're not just looking at activities, but we're also looking at outcomes according to the donor. Like, where are they in the process, and and strategies. What strategies have you developed to help them move themselves forward? Do they need to meet with other board members? Do they need to attend an event? Would they just need to see or speak to some beneficiaries, for instance, or take a tour of the hospital, for instance, right? So removing the friction points that impede progress is what I think is more important. And I'd like you to think about that as we move into the next breakout rooms. We've only got about 30 minutes left. So we'll do 10 minutes there. And now I want you to talk not about what metrics you measure, but let's talk about what metrics you think you should measure. And maybe based on what I've just talked about, maybe you've got some creative ideas that we can come together and show off, and then we'll wrap up. So let's take us away, Miss Tricia. What we realized is, like, there's so many metrics that we could measure, and especially if you're thinking about plan giving, people are almost anybody can leave a plan gift, and these can be donors, non-donors, people who just follow you on Facebook or something, right? I mean, how are we going to capture all those metrics? So since Dr. James is here and he's so wise, I'd like to hand the mic over to him and see if we can stir some conversation and hear from people what ideas they thought we should measure. And feel free to put them in the chat. as well, if you came up with new ideas of things that we should measure. What do you think, Dr. James? What's going on here? What are we doing?
So Greg, I think one of the challenges here is, and again, this comes back to your message about strategy. It's a question of what are you trying to do? If you are trying to build value for the client, if you're trying to enhance their donation experience, then we can do that in the context of, these visits or these significant contacts. We can do that. There was a great story in our group about somebody just asking a donor about their connections to the cause, their, and I always like to say their people connections, their life story connections, their values connections to the organization, to the cause, or possibly even to the project. And just that process of trying to get the story from people can be so powerful in enhancing their donor experience and their donation experience. And so can when we ask about different possible victory, different possible uses of the gifts. Which of these possibilities connects well with their people, their values, and their stories? But the whole sort of point to back up from that is to recognize that our goal is to make that donation experience more meaningful for them. In other words, our goal is to work together with the client to deliver value. And the challenge is that if the organization doesn't see the fundraising role as delivering value, working together with the donor to deliver the greatest donor experience, then, you can check all the boxes you want, but you don't have the same destination. So the visits may just be, ask soon, ask small, so your close percentage is great, and you can use the same metrics, but you're not trying to get to the same destination. And so that was a bit of that challenge of, the reality is every metric can be abused. There's not a perfect metric, and it kind of starts with what are you trying to do? I like to use the example. Every organization says, wouldn't it be great? Won't it be great when that $10 million gift comes in? But very few say, won't it be great when we can deliver a donor experience that is worth $10 million? Because if that's your goal, that's really hard work, right? Because that's about delivering value. And if that's your goal, then some of these metrics can really help. But it is a challenge. Like Greg, for example, one of the things that we see in the business world is that one metric that completely separates the sales organizations from the key account, the big dollar organizations, is whether or not they have individual plans for each client. Because frankly, if you're just selling, you don't need any individual plans. Everybody's path is the same. It's buy and then buy some more. But if you're trying to build value with the client, then that's where you're going to need those individual plans. But again, that's another one where it's not something that drives the success. It's just one of those little flags that comes up when you're doing the right thing. You can raise the flag and still not be doing the right thing, if that makes sense. So, so it's a real challenge to come up with the magic metric system. Greg, any thoughts on any of that?
Well, I was mentioning about customer success in the private sector. It is very much like a caseload for major gift fundraising. And it is exactly that, is that I implore my team to spend more time thinking about customers, their needs, their how they see a victory, what impediments are in the way, and how we can remove them. It's interesting, even in the very beginning, like once we launch a system, and usually folks get kind of a flood of leads, and then the first question or thought or concern, they'll say, well, I call them, but they're not responding to me. So I always say, and some of you, I probably said it to you on this, or my staff maybe has, is that if they're not responding to you, it's for two reasons. It's one, they don't trust you, and two, they don't see the value that you provide. So if you're providing value, that builds trust. So, and the value at that stage of the consideration continuum is going to be very different than the value you provide towards the end of their decision-making process when you're negotiating a gift and such. But the value should, generally speaking, always align with their original identity. I think it was Vicky in my little group who was talking about Simon Sinek and his book about why. Is if you can, the original identity is really their why. So if you can reconnect an offer of value associated with you and a reason for them to talk to you that connects with their original identity and their why. So the easiest one, frankly, is just to say, you wrote in the survey this and that, and I'm just curious about that story and wonder if you would elaborate more on that. And nobody's ever asked people this, you know, not even their own family or anything. So that's a good offer is what I'm trying to say. So in terms of metrics, what am I rambling about? Is that maybe a metric is, so what kind of offer, you know, how many offers did you deliver of value, and how much value? And did you ask about asking? Did you invite people to critique the offers? Did you put them all on a sheet of paper and say, look, here's a menu of offers we created. I'm curious what you think about it. You know, people will respond to that and help.
So Greg, I'll just jump in. I think we're actually in the business of storytelling. And the most powerful story for a donor is their story, right? And when we think about metrics, how do we manage storytellers? Yeah, we can manage how many words per day are you putting out, right? How many hours per day are you in the seat? And those are important things, because if the answer is 0, then you're not writing the great American novel, right? We know that, you know, if those are 0. But you can hit all of those metrics and be a garbage writer, right? And so I think that's the challenge with metrics is like, you know, they can be useful feedback, but like, how are we using them? Do we think we're going to create metrics that are just going to force our results? Or is this more a helpful way where we can come alongside the fundraiser and say, hey, you know, maybe we have an issue here. I've noticed this. Do you think this is something we can work on? You know, and so it's like you can take the same tool and you can use it in a very powerful way, or you can use it in an abusive way. You know, it's just a tool. And so that's really sometimes the challenge with metrics that, you know, what's the magic metric? Well, you know, I don't know that we've seen that.
I'm going to see if anybody wants to chime in here, because Dr. James and I can just go. So if you want, just raise your hand and Trisha will try to find you, you know, if you, or throw something in there. I see Cecilia is always willing to help. Go ahead. Let's see. I think you should be able to. I don't know.
I mean, you've been talking a lot about value proposition, Greg, and which is, to me, sounds very much like it's derived from sales and marketing, which I think is the primary reason that we have these senseless metrics imposed on us fundraisers. I'm sorry, but you know, after 2 decades of torture from people who are bean counters, it's really not about that. You know what donors really care about? They care about meaning. And Professor James is always talking about stories. What are stories about? It's about meaning. And you know, you can see the indication of meanings, what the meaning is for the donor, you know, of what this charity is about, from the way that they're engaged with the institution. Where are they deriving their meaning? You know, do they go to the sports events? Do they go to the events by, say, if it's a university, from their, you know, their department, like art or whatever? Is that where they go to a lot? That's already indicative right there where their financial commitment, their legacy commitment is going to come from. So what is our job as fundraisers? Our fundraisers, we're supposed to deepen those connections so that the meaning actually grows for them. Because when it does, you can bet down the line, if you're cultivating these connections and this sense of meaning that the donors derive from these institutions, that they're going to make a commitment. You know, and if they're stewarded properly in the way that's meaningful to them, not in the way that we think we want to steward them, then, they're going to increase that commitment, which has been my experience, in my work, because I'm out there in the field, I'm actually working, with these donors, and these financial targets and this, like, you have to make like 20 visits a month and whatever. The reality is the Pareto principle applies to fundraising in an even more extreme form. Only 1% at most of those donors are going to make these big, huge gifts, right? So you're going to be concentrating on maybe at most 10 people who are going to be making those huge legacy gifts. And with these legacy gifts can also come from very modest individuals where they give you their entire estate. And you'd be surprised how somebody who lives in a mobile home can actually have like maybe 250,000 or something that eventually comes to you. So, and that's what you have legacy societies for, right? To provide that constant form of stewardship and connection. So that's what I'm missing from, this conversation. It's like, where's the meaning? Where's the engagement?
Yeah, you're right on target. And I'm going to pick on my buddy, Tim Andrews, because we've been wrestling together. Actually, we've been working together. Is like, okay, how do we get leadership to participate in this kind of conversation? and I know Tim he posted that in the chat. Anybody have any ideas for Tim and me? Because we're working on that. Anybody been successful at communicating this with leadership? We'd have to have you raise your hand so we can unmute since there are so many.
Nope.
There's Jessica, maybe.
I was just going to say we could record this and send this video to them.
It is recorded, and we will be sending it to all of you. Sure. I hope they'll watch. Let's see. Sharon, our good friend. Hi, Sharon.
Hi. I just saw Elizabeth posted sharing documented research, and I was thinking something along the same lines, but more on the story side. Like, if I can tell anecdotally, every time we see some institution in the region that gets a ginormous gift, and they're maybe not as big of an institution or as experienced in fundraising and all that, we all go, how did they do that? We'll call them up and ask. But if there's some sort of clearinghouse where people would share their cultivation stories, I think that would be hugely helpful to then be able to go to leadership and say, this is how they did it at Montana State University. This is how they did it at, whatever. And it's not always going to be directly applicable, but I think it could be helpful.
Well, as we wrap up, I should mention to you, Sharon, that we have a Slack channel that is not available to customers, but our team, because of our automated cultivation and our support, we hear stories from folks like you all the time. And then we post it. Sometimes they're tear jerkers and we end up crying together, but we post it in our company-wide Slack channel. So if you want stories, just reach out to your customer success manager. They've got them. Yeah. So
good to know.
Yeah. Because this is what we live, eat, and breathe. We don't often get to hear the stories. We see the survey responses and we see the migration and the advancement through the pipeline, but we don't hear the stories. We don't deal with the donors. So to hear your victories is really, really awesome. And look, we're at the top of the hour, everybody. I know that there were some hands raised and I didn't get to everybody today. I really appreciate that we had so many people here today. I hope you'll continue your path through the content in the training course, or if you haven't started it, please start it. I think you'll find it really, really, really valuable. And remember that your leadership can take the course. One price, and you can have 100 people take the course. I'm not trying to make money on it. The only reason we charge for the course is because we know that if people don't pay, they won't take it at all. So we're trying to make it so that you give it away, give it to board members and such. They will collaborate more with you. I promise you. They'll understand what the heck you do. So with that today, everybody, thank you so much for this rapid fire hour of fun. And I hope you'll come back next month. Put it on your calendar to come back every month. It seems this is like a snowball. It just keeps getting bigger and better. So please tell all your friends, invite your colleagues, invite board members and leaders, and we'll see you next time. And feel free to reach out to me anytime you need anything. I would love to talk to you or hear from you. And that's it for today. Thank you.